Okay. Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. Even. How are you all doing this fine day? Hopefully you're feeling okay and looking forward to me and Lenny squirming as we go through this session. Hopefully you're all here for the Controlled Dartboard webinar. I'm Andy Sanford. I used to work with some of you, used to work for Torbay Council, got my own company now. We are lean and agile, so we do process improvement stuff. That's me, really.
Oh, okay. Sorry, just reading all the chats already. Nice to see some names I recognise. Nice to also see some names I don't, which is great. So my name's Lenny Bedian. I am the owner and director of BW Training Limited. So we predominantly work in training and coaching, either on a one-to-one basis or kind of organisational wide. So yeah, more to come of that as we go through. So nice to be here.
Excellent. So we're trying some new technology today. That's all my responsibility. So all that lies on my shoulders. Hope it works. For those of you that can't make it, obviously you're not on here, but we're going to make it available in every way we can. So it'll be available to you as a recording, but also we'll put it up on Google, YouTube, so you can anyone can access it later. What we're going to try and do with this webinar is make it as interactive as possible. Neither Lenny nor I lets people sit back and not be engaged, and it's great to see people in the chat already. So we have a few things we're actually going to run as we go through. So one of the first ones is a poll. So we're going to go into that right now. The first poll we're going to offer up, he says, trying to do two things at once, which is terrible for me, is that we're going to ask you, how are you feeling today? So it'd be great if you could let us know. Obviously, it's quite a trying time. So where are you in that spin cycle today? Hopefully you should see a poll pop up. You can answer that poll. Oh, we've got one. First one scared. Oh, that's you.
Yeah.
So if you can't see this in the polls, there we go. We're starting to see some come through. That's brilliant. Brilliant. So, okay, happy's good. Meh is, yeah, I get that one. Great stuff. If you carry on, that's brilliant. I'll carry on with my bit before we get to the good stuff from Lenny. So next up, we're also going to use the chat. So you've all used the chat so far. That's brilliant. Great to see. But in terms of the chat, what are you looking for from the session? Because Lenny is obviously very interactive. Lots of you, I'm sure, will have had sessions if you haven't. So please say, what are you trying to get? And we will try and tailor this as we can as we go through. And that's the royal we, because that's Lenny tailoring that for you. So please feel free to share in the chat. Lenny's sitting in the chat whilst I'm yabbering on. So Lenny will be reading those and I will crack on. Last up, we've got a couple other things. Obviously, presentation goes without saying. You're looking at a presentation on the screen. But we will be doing a Q&A at the end. So do use the Q&A area to specifically ask Lenny any questions. We will try to get to them today. If we can't, we will certainly be reacting to those, responding to those as we can. We've got quite a lot of people on the webinar, which is absolutely brilliant. So we may not be able to get to them all, but please do stick your stuff in there for the Q&A later, and we'll come to that after Lenny's presentation. So I'll just carry on for a couple of slides, but I mean, this goes without saying. Our company, I've spent the last 2, 3, 4 weeks even, rapidly redoing our business model, trying to help our existing customers and our new customers, and redesigning our service to deal with the new normal, which is not being able to go and stand in front of people and help them. So we've done a number of things, and probably I'm only going to pick up the expert webinar one, really, which is fantastic. You know, we moved everything online. We've got Lenny here for the very first one. And I think it's a really good thing that out of this has come that myself and Lenny have connected after about 2 years of exchanging messages and just being busy and actually getting to do some stuff together. So it's brilliant to have this session. And I saw some talk on various social media about Control Dartboard from the people that have been on the course. And genuinely, I thought at this point in time, this is probably the most important thing we can do for people. Certainly from me personally. So I'm going to throw it over to the expert in the room rather than the idiot in the room.
Thank you very much. I assume you mean me.
Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon, folks. Really interesting to read the chat. It's a strange medium for me. This is not. This is my very first webinar, and I'm not used to kind of virtual interaction. So you have to bear with me. I'm trying to keep my eye on your chat and make sure that you get out of it what you need. Some really interesting phrases. There was a phrase in there about there isn't an option for feeling overwhelmed. I think that's a really interesting point. I think at the moment there is just so much going on. It's kind of, how do I compartmentalize that? How do I separate stuff out? Also really nice to hear that people are interested in Control Dartboard. I'll be really frank with you, everything we talk about today is common sense, very much common sense. You'll know it, you'll rationalize it in the moment now while you've got the time to digest it. It makes sense, it seems logical. When you're in the moment where emotion takes over and your amygdala kicks in and all that adrenaline is running through your body, it's a very different set of circumstances. So there's a couple of things for me just to be really clear about. Firstly, this is not to say don't experience emotions, because with the best will in the world, that's just not going to happen. Anyone who tells you they don't do that is a fib, because I'll be frank with you, I've spent all weekend spinning out about where we are with our business, what that means in terms of government support and help. And I spent a whole day in it, a whole day wallowing in kind of anxiety and panic, really overwhelmed, feeling entirely overwhelmed. And where this model is really useful is to say to yourself, actually, am I now just being unhelpful for myself? Am I now just creating a problem in and of itself by staying in this emotional state? If so, what can I do to kind of break that thinking? So it is not about being this kind of cold, robotic, non-emotional individual. Quite the opposite. It is about accepting those emotions, recognizing them, those emotions, and asking yourself, what can I do with them? How can I compartmentalize them and kind of park them and move on? The phrase we often use with Control Dartboard is let it go, but I'm very conscious, particularly if you're in lockdown, when you're in lockdown, how many times you might have seen Frozen over the last few days, those of you that have young children. I'm not going to keep saying let it go, because it will drive you up the wall. So I will say about parking it. What I would also say is, you know, in terms of common sense and common practice, we know this stuff. I've said that already. The difference between knowing it and doing it is the significance, because actually we can know it, but if we're not doing any of it, it's pointless. So you're not going to leave here today with any great revelations. You know, this isn't rocket science. It is a reminder for a lot of you. For some of you, it's a new model, but the techniques are really, really simple. Anything that's overcomplicated, that's going to take loads of time out of your life, it's going to be very difficult to apply. So there's lots of different applications. I'll talk about that when we get to the Control Dartboard slide. But I wanted to start off with this quote that I'm hoping you can see in front of you. It's been credited to a load of people. I found it around Charles Swindoll, which is a pastor and an author. I love it. But, you know, I'm convinced that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. There is a lot going on at the moment that I'm sure is creating all sorts of reactions in you. And we're going to ask you to share some of those in a minute. What are some of the anxieties? What are some of the reactions you're having? The bottom line is a lot of those things are out of our control. They're things that we have to accept. The question then becomes, well, how am I reacting to those things? How helpful is that response? So we're going to go through a lot around kind of what is useful for me in what I'm thinking, and how do I interrupt that thinking? How do I stop that pattern of automatic behavior? And Control Dartboard is a brilliant tool with which to do that. what I would also say is this is the first webinar. We're going to kind of keep our fingers crossed, hope it lands okay for you guys. And we're hoping that we'll roll out some more sessions. If nothing else, it keeps me out of my wife's hair, which is a good thing. So there's something for me about how do you build on controlled dartboard? What are some of the other techniques, which we've got a list for you to pick from later on. So we'll share that with you. So. Okay, so bear that one in mind. This is about recognizing those reactions and recognizing how you respond to those. So let's kick it off. And I see lots of chat going on, which is amazing. So just as much as you're comfortable with, 2 or 3 things that are causing you. We've used the word anxiety. I think that's probably a fairly understandable term, but just emotional responses at the moment. What are some of the things that are playing on your mind that are either mild irritations or let's be frank, are keeping you awake at night? So if you can use the chat to kind of maybe share a few of those, just thinking about maybe a couple of things, somebody put in there about feeling overwhelmed. Somebody mentioned about keeping their team on track in terms of, keeping them together and keeping team cohesion. So what is it that's kind of, the topics that are kind of playing on your mind? So I'll just give you a second, just have a think about that. I can see a few coming up, but it's really useful to get some real examples. So we've got stuff around isolation. Yeah, I get that. I think definitely about connectivity and how do we kind of keep that team dynamic going? Yeah, how long is this going to go on? How do I keep safe? Wow, that's an interesting one. I missed the banter at work. So it's kind of just a small thing. That's really important. Been asked to do a lot around kind of connectivity and how do we keep that team dynamic, which is even more important in the current climate. So there's a lot around connection and isolation. Well, that's an interesting one. Supermarket, and that people aren't adhering to what they're being asked to do. We will get into controlled dartboard in more detail. One of the things that I often think about is a mantra that I use a lot, which is, what other people do is up to them. What I do is up to me. The issue then becomes, well, actually, if I can do my bit and others aren't doing theirs, what impact does that have on me? I notice also there's things here around income, starting a new job remotely. Yes, congratulations on the new job. Well done. Not an easy time to get a new job. So there's huge positive reframe in that. I've got colleagues here and friends here that are working for the NHS or key workers. Lots of my colleagues and friends are key workers, and keeping going in the face of all of this. I mean, just from someone who's not in that environment, thank you. Absolutely thank you. I don't think you can ever thank somebody in that profession enough. Let's hope at some point there's more than just my thank you, and that it's recognised a bit more. So, okay, we've got plenty here to be going from. We have an L from someone. Oh, that's my cousin. Okay, well, they live in Wales. What are you going to do? So I'm assuming she'll add some more to that in a minute. So
there's lots of L's in Wales.
Well, yeah. There we go. So let's have a think about bearing in mind some of those things. And some of you may not have written them in the chat. You might be thinking about them. There may be things you're not prepared to share or not necessarily willing to share at this point. So whichever ones you've come up with, and I'll pick some of these up and we'll run them back through the model in just a second. Let's have a look at kind of the model that we can use in terms of how we can start to compartmentalize, I guess, some of those things. So as you can see on the screen in front of you, I'm hoping, technology notwithstanding, is 3 concentric circles. And for those of you that have read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, you will recognize this model as what he calls the spheres of influence, which is a very nice academic way of putting it. I dumbed it down because I'm a bit of a dumb, and for me it's controlled dartboard. So that's the language I use, but it is based on the spheres of influence. So 3 concentric circles, the sizes of which probably seem significant, but actually probably aren't significant. It's just easy to put the language around it. So on the outside circle, what we'll have is no control. So there are things that we recognize sit entirely in no control. Does it make them fair? Does it make them easy? Does it make them just? Probably not. Does it make them things that we can change? Arguably not either. And if we're putting a lot of energy and emotional kind of investment into things that we can't change, then the impact ultimately sits with us. Because if we can't change them and we're putting a lot of emotional energy into them, at what point are we going to make a different decision? There's loads of kind of similar mantras around this. So the kind of serenity prayer, the thing around kind of, again, 10% circumstance, 90% reaction. The key bit for me here is actually, is the energy I'm putting in here, at what point does it become disproportionate? At what point am I putting a lot of my emotion into something? And actually, the phrase I always use in training is I'm sort of banging my head against a brick wall. If that brick wall is still going to be there, the only thing that's going to suffer is your head. So we'll do a little bit more on this in just a second. I just want to run through the kind of areas first of all. So no control is clearly stuff over which we have no control. There is a lot of grey area with control dartboard. So it might be something in and of itself I can't entirely explicitly control, but there may be areas over which I have some influence. So for example, if we take the elephant in the room, can we control the fact that this virus is rampantly charging its way through the world? Well, no. We can't control that. And to try and do that would create all sorts of frustration, anxiety, etc. But there are huge amounts of things we can do around influence. So just by way of a kind of straw poll show of hands, we don't have a poll for it. Sorry, Andy, don't worry. I'm interested as to whether some of you are already 10 days in, not even, going a little bit stir crazy, maybe. I know you talked about isolation, work-wise, that's a slightly different thing. How many of you are finding... It's funny, my wife and my friends will say this to you. I've been practicing for this all my life. Despite my job, I'm not really a people person. So the kind of being away from people is not, I miss people, of course, but it's not a major issue. However, knowing I can't go out, knowing I'm restricted around that creates anxiety, because not being able to do something, even if perhaps I don't want to do it, creates that anxiety for me. So a few of you, if I'm working at home, a few of you have said, maybe a little bit kind of stir crazy. Use that as an example, because we can't control the fact that we're limited to one hour outdoor exercise a day. We can't control that. What we can control is, or at the very least influence, is how we use the time inside, how we kind of be productive during that time. One of the things Andy and I have spoken about in terms of a series of workshops around based on control dartboard is, okay, so how are we using our influence? What goals are we setting ourselves? How are we kind of connecting with people? Where's our level of emotional intelligence around what's happening and how we're feeling? So there's a whole series of stuff that links to this model. What this model is about doing is helping us compartmentalize our thinking a little bit and actually trying to let go of the stuff that is just not healthy for us to hang on to. So we'll go through this in a bit more detail as we go through. Apologies, I can see Andy smiling and I'm smiling too. I'm guessing you're reading some of these chats. So, there's some interesting ones about not throttling people. So, I think someone made the point here, technology is great as well. FaceTime, Zoom, I'm sure a load of you are using that. I tried Skype this morning. Technology wasn't entirely forthcoming, but it does make such a difference, that connectivity. I know a big one for me is worrying about my mum being on her own, and I'm sure a lot of you can identify with that as well. So influence is about what can we do? What are some of the things that we can move forward on in a positive way? They may not change the non-negotiables, but they will at least give us a feeling of, within the parameters of the non-negotiables, there are things that I can do. There are things that I can start to feel that I'm taking some control back. The middle circle, very promptly pinged up there. Thank you, Mr. Sanford, is around control. And it's so simple. I will always ask, and I'll ask you, and I'll even wait for your responses. What's the one thing each and every one of us control? I will wait as long as I need to.
I'll go.
Thank you. What's the one thing each and every one of you watching, sitting at home, control? The amount of time watching the news, fantastic. What we do, somebody's written. Ourselves, our thoughts, ourselves, you can see where I'm going here. Ultimately, what you control is you. And if we come back to that Charles Swindoll quote, life is going to happen. It's going to happen around us. How you respond, thank you, Richard, how you respond to those events is in your gift. Now, does it feel easy at that point in time when your amygdala kicks in and all that adrenaline courses through you and your emotions go through the roof? No, absolutely not. The principle of control dartboard is to interrupt that thinking. I use this model on most of the training I do. And somebody once said to me, I call it the 0 to 60 model. It stops me going from 0 to 60 in the blink of an eye. Now, there are days where we want to go from 0 to 60. There are days where we want to stomp around the place and feel rubbish and moan and whinge and complain. And that is perfectly normal. That is the human condition. At some point, however, you need to be asking yourself, how helpful is this to me? How resourceful am I being when I'm feeling this way? So please don't take away from here that what I'm saying to you is don't feel emotion. Any of you that know me know that for me to sit here in judgment of anyone demonstrating emotion is entirely hypocritical. What I'm saying to you is, when does that emotion become unhelpful? When are those emotional responses debilitating rather than useful in terms of our response? So very simply put, the principle behind the control dartboard is there are things either entirely or partially I can't control. There are things I may have influence over. And ultimately, there is one main thing I can control, which is me, what I do and how I respond. Now, we use this a lot I said there are sort of various ways you can use this model. So I tend to use it when working with organizations, because organizations tend to change quite frequently. I work a lot with local government. I work also with private industry, and by definition, stuff changes. And sometimes people can struggle with that. You know, am I going to have a desk? Where am I going to sit? Who am I going to be sat next to? What parking spaces am I going to have? And a lot of that is stuff over which people have, at the very least, an element of influence. But it's also about being adult with people and being upfront with people and rationalizing, with the best will in the world, there may be things that you don't have a choice over, that your organization or your parents or your mother or your next door neighbor or the government choose to do that are not in your gift to change. Now, at that point, of course, we have a choice, which is, can I reconcile those things that are in no control? Can I live with them, particularly in the workplace? So some of you may at some point or another have left a job because of a feeling that I can't control these significant things, these things that matter to me. I haven't got a parking space, or I don't know that my job is secure, or whatever else it might be. And you've chosen to take your control and you've chosen to leave. The problem, of course, now is we don't have that choice. We can't up and go. We can't say, I'm checking out. So this calls on us even more to use the resources that we have. And later on, I'm going to ask you to share with each other what resources you do have. You know, I've no idea how many people online. Andy kept giving me the number, I'm sure, to wind me up even more than I already was. But I know we were up to 50, and I think there's 80 people registered. So if you don't have a set of resources between 50 and 70 and 80 people, you ain't going to get it from me. There's a huge set of people out here that have got an enormous amount of knowledge and information, and we're going to share that, or ask you to share that in just a second. So I'm interested as to, at this point, I am a little bit conscious of our time, but I am also conscious that I do tend to talk quite quickly. So whether there's anything at this point anybody wants to pick up on in terms of the basic principle of control dartboard, does the concept of it make sense?
I think silence is golden there, Lenny.
Shall we go with that? Let's assume no information is good information. So you will have the option later on, in terms of some of the topics we're going to be looking at, to possibly want to do more around control dartboard. So if you wanted to go into it in more detail, fantastic. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. No one's saying no, so that's all good. When I train, I like to keep models simple. Somebody's just said that, sensible, simple. It's a sensible, simple model, because you haven't got time in your brains for anything that's massively complicated. Life is pretty full at the best of times. So the idea behind this is just to stop for a millisecond and ask yourself, what am I doing here? Is this something I can change? Because if I can't, I'm putting a lot of energy and effort into something. For what response? For what outcome? For what kickback? So that's the principle behind it. Fantastic. All right. So then the question becomes, what can I do to interrupt my thinking then? So if I understand the model and it makes sense, it might be not until after the event that you go, do you know what? If I'd applied control dartboard there, I might have reacted differently. Well, that's great. That's good learning. So ask yourself, what can I do next time so that the model is a bit more prevalent in my mind? But there are some really good ways to kind of start to change your thinking. One of the things I didn't mention is I'm a neurolinguistic programming practitioner and coach, and that's a topic for us later on if that's something you might be interested in. And what NLP encourages us to think about is kind of what language am I using with myself? What reality am I creating for myself? So if I can put a little pause in my thinking and give myself a choice about my response, I may make a different choice. I may not. I may still get angry. I may still stomp about, but at least I'm doing that through choice rather than reaction. So if we go on to the next slide, I think it's useful to just start thinking about what are some of the things you can start to do. So coaches, fundamentally coaching, top, bottom, middle of coaching, and anyone who tells you otherwise, again, is a fibber, is good questions. Good coaches ask good questions. So you can self-coach around some of this stuff. So to train yourself to ask some simple questions. Is this something I can change? Classic control dartboard question. Because if the answer to that is no, are you going to choose to put energy into it? At that point, you've got a choice. Put energy into it, get angry, get frustrated. But if you can't change it, that's not going to change anything. All that's going to do is create a response in you, not just an emotional response, but a physical response. We know the chemicals that are released when we're stressed and anxious are unhealthy. There's tons of research around it. So first question, can I change it? This is always a question I ask, but I think in the current climate, this is a challenging question to ask, given the current climate. How important will this be in a couple of months' time? Or maybe we should add a bit of time onto that. How important will it be in a year's time? It's lovely to see in social media people saying, this will change how we function. This will change how we engage with each other. The minute we're all let off the leash, we'll all be in pubs and, buying British. And let's hope people hang on to that, because how we feel now, in a year's time, we may feel very differently. So it's really useful. I use a scale of 1 to 10 quite a lot. If I was to put this on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being I've stubbed my toe, 10 being scenario, where is the issue that I'm experiencing? So how important will it be in a couple of months' time? It's a good question to ask. Okay. This is an interesting one. I'm half Greek, I'm an Aries, and I'm a woman. So add all those together, my response tends to be a bit volcanic, and therefore oftentimes is entirely disproportionate to the situation at hand. I would argue that my responses at the moment are probably quite proportionate, all things considered. But again, I know we're talking about coronavirus, the elephant in the room in terms of control dartboard, but it won't always be coronavirus. Things will change. This too shall pass. So am I getting anxious about where my next lead's going to come from? Am I getting anxious about how I connect with my staff? Am I proportionately responding to the issue at hand? Okay. How can I improve it? What can I do to change it? Because actually, sometimes we get paralyzed by the things we can't control, rather than asking ourselves, well, what could I do? How can I make this different? What is in my gift? So those two, the first and fourth question at this point, very much linked to control dartboard. Actually, what can I do to improve this situation? For me, a big part of that is how we set ourselves goals. We're going to be looking at one of the later webinars about goal setting and setting them in the positive, which is very much about how our brains deal with negative information. So if I say to you now, don't think about a purple elephant, don't let a purple elephant enter your head at all, there's a strong possibility that quite a few of you have got a purple elephant. People often say to me, I've still got that flipping purple elephant you gave me ages ago. So because I've told you not to think about it, you've got to think about it to then not think about it, if that makes sense. So goal setting is really important around how can I improve? What can I do? How do I focus my energy? So we'll cover that later on in a different webinar. What can I learn from it? Actually, how can I take this away positively? From every bad experience, there is feedback. One of my favorite NLP quotes is, there is no failure, only feedback. There's tons of research around that. So there's tons of examples where, Walt Disney schlepped himself around to so many different studios and was rejected by so many different people. Thomas Edison, in terms of the light bulb, went through something, I believe I'm right in saying it was something like 87 incarnations of how to get the filament to work. So Fantasia, yeah, I get that. So at what point do we kind of say, actually, I'm learning here, this is something I can learn from, and what will I do differently as a result of that learning? Okay. This is mine. Oh, this is a big one for me. When I first became self-employed, as I'm sure those of you that are self-employed can identify with, there's huge amounts of self-doubt, little nagging voice. And I would lie in bed awake at night and I would go, I'm not going to be able to, keep a roof over my head. I'm not going to be able to do all the things I want to do. And my heart would start racing and my breathing would change and my palms would sweat. And a mantra that I found really useful to ask myself is, or tell myself really, is you're making a choice here. This is your choice. You are creating this response. And is this response actually helpful? To which, of course, the answer very often is, well, no, it's not helpful. That anxiety inducing response that I had at that point in time was just not helpful. But it was a choice I was making. I was choosing to create that anxiety. So that's really useful. We're going to make these handouts available towards the end, and all of this stuff is available to you. And please do contact me. I've got tons of other stuff, loads of information. So, there's tons of stuff out there, but really simply just get used to asking yourself questions. Is this helpful? Can I control it? If not, what can I do? How can I move it forward in a positive way? So we mentioned a minute ago that we were going to ask you to kind of think about your mantra. I've shared with you, which is mine, which is that kind of, is this a helpful choice that I'm making? Just by way of jumping on the poll really quickly, do any of the rest of you have kind of mantras? Do you have phrases that you use with yourself that you find useful, or different ways that you kind of language things just to kind of ask yourself or challenge yourself to think in a different way? So I can't see the poll, so I'm going to guess Andy will give me a bit of feedback.
They're starting to come in now. Couple of yeses, couple of no's, a few yeses. In fact, yeah, quite a few yeses coming in now.
Okay, if we've got some yeses, then what might be really useful, bearing in mind we've got a brilliant resource pool here, is let's share some of them. What are some of the phrases that you use? One of my favorites is "this too shall pass." This too shall pass, as everything does. I hate the dentist. Absolutely hate the dentist. And from the minute I walk through the door to the minute I leave, I keep saying to myself, this too shall pass, this too shall pass, this too shall pass. This is a blink in the eye of our lives. This time, it's a blink in the eye, but it doesn't feel like that. So what is it? What is it is this helping or exhausting me? I like that. That's a really good one. Emotional energy is absolutely exhausting. Yeah, distracting yourself. Be interested to know how you do that. Nicola, I'm interested in that one. Can I do anything about it? Very controlled dartboard language. Oh, does it really matter? I like that. I'm all over an acronym. I do like a good acronym. Does it really matter? Great. Pursuit of excellence and life abundance in health. Wow, that's a nice one. That's a very
Steve is on fire there.
A deep one, Steve. That's very deep. I like that. It's a phase. Yeah, this too shall pass. I've lost connection since the purple elephant. It's Wales, see? Don't have a lot of purple elephants in Wales.
Don't worry, it's all recorded.
Jolly good, jolly good. It is what it is. Yeah, brilliant. A few of my mantras. What would Lenny say? Oh dear, you gotta love that. I do often get asked, are you gonna have a "What Would Lenny Do" app? I think there's definitely a gap in the market there. What would Lenny do is probably have a hysterical reaction. That's a nice one, Andy. Mr. Oka, brilliant example. The phrase you just used there is something we use in coaching, which is, have you had a similar experience to this before, and what did you do then? You are the best resource you have. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it, but you are absolutely the best resource. So remember your first driving lesson and how you felt at your first driving lesson. I guarantee you came away going, I came away going, I'm going to kill someone here. Who's putting me in charge of this? This is not a good idea. And yet now, thank you, Richard, I may well get onto that app. And now, how often do you think about driving? You get in your car, you put it in gear, you drive. So if you've done it in the past, there's nothing to suggest you can't do it again now. What are the resources you have available that you can bring to bear now? You are the best resource you have. So these are really great. Maybe we can carry these on. I don't quite know how. I'd have to leave the technology to Andy. But as Andy's mentioned, we're going to share the video, but we're also going to share the polls. And bugger off is what I say to myself to change any negative thoughts. Okay, helpful. So we're going to share all of this as well. So if you want to keep these coming, if not in the chat now, if there's some way, sorry, Andy, I probably should have asked you this before putting you on the spot, but is there any way for people to continue to share these so we can capture them?
Carry on sharing them in the chat and we'll work out how we get them out afterwards. I mean, this is a learning curve, what we can get. We're going to update the handout so that some of the polls and some of the chat and some of the common themes come through.
So there's loads here, which is great. For those of you that may have dipped out and in, Purple Elephant notwithstanding, we're just kind of getting some ideas and some good suggestions about what sort of mantras people use with themselves. So how they kind of, what that self-talk is. We've got a subject later on around self-talk and how we can we can often be our own worst enemies. So that little nagging voice, that little nagging doubt. And if I would argue, if you can put it in there negatively, equally, you can put it in there positively. It's just, how do you go about doing that? What is the kind of neural pathway that you need to create to make that a habit? That's a good way of thinking at it. So yeah, please carry on sharing those. They're really good, and we'll definitely get those circulated round. I'm a little bit aware of where we're at, and we definitely want to open up to some Q&A. So just a kind of couple of little thoughts just to finish us off. I love this quote. Some of you may have seen this quote from me before. I think it's very apt at this point in time. So here is Edward Bear coming down the stairs now, bump, bump, bump on the back of his head behind Christopher Robin. It is, as far as he knows, the only way of getting down the stairs. But sometimes he feels there really is a better way. If only he could stop bumping for a moment and think of it. You have the ability now to stop bumping. Is it your choice? Possibly not. Is it what you would have wanted to have happened? Possibly not. But for me, the key bit here is, what are you doing with this time? How are you using it? You have to stop bumping for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 months, 6 months. We don't know. Who knows? That's our control dartboard again. What we do know is that we have to do things differently. And again, you know, people in glass houses, I can't tell you how anxious I've been about this. This is not my preference. This is not my forte. And it didn't go as badly as I hope it didn't go as badly as I thought it was going to go. So we have to do things differently. The key bit here for me is, what are you using this time to do? How are you stopping bumping? We do the best we can do with the resources we have available. Now we have to avail ourselves of a whole different set of resources. So I like that quote. That's an interesting one to think about, and something for you to think about, which does link us into the kind of final bit we want to throw back to you, really, which is, in terms of your bumping, what are you doing differently? How are you living, working, connecting differently based on the elephant in the room, based on the thing over which we have no control? So what are you starting? Yes, thank you, Mr. Oaker, The Tao of Pooh. You've got to love it. If you've never read it, a really good book to read, The Tao of Pooh. There's loads of good reading, actually. So again, if you want to contact us, I'm happy to circulate some suggestions around some good books if you've got plenty of time on your hands. So might be a good time to use it. So in terms of what are you doing differently, or what perhaps would you like to be doing differently? Again, if you can perhaps ping some stuff in the chat, that would be really useful. So are you connecting differently? A few of you talked about using FaceTime and social media. Are you spending time with children differently? A lot of you are teachers now, which is fair play. Yeah, Chimp Paradox, great book, very much links to transactional analysis, which we can cover as a topic later on if that might be useful. Changing mindset, stop and think, great. Trying to be more patient and understanding. It's a very interesting presupposition there, the word trying. The word trying presupposes we're giving it a go. Are you doing that? I mean, if you're doing it, it's beyond trying, isn't it? You are doing it. You might not be doing it as successfully as you'd like, but you are doing it. So language is really important. I was on a coaching call this morning, and one of the people I'm coaching is asking his manager to be, and I quote, more vulnerable. I'm not sure anyone is entirely comfortable being told to be vulnerable. What they might feel more comfortable being asked to do is to be connected and to be human and to show kind of empathy. That's a different phrase, but feeling vulnerable may not be tremendously comfortable. So having to organize my time differently, yeah, it's hugely different. Good habits, bad habits. Oh yeah, again, some really good books coming up on here. We'll share this. So yeah, learn new things. I've set myself a challenge, 2 things, one thing in the house and one thing on the business every day. So if it's a phone call, that's something I'm doing. If it's changing a light bulb, that's something I'm doing. So video chatting, yeah, usually use it, love it, yeah, absolutely. We're going to do some stuff as one of the later topics around connectivity and team dynamics and linking that into emotional intelligence, which I think is really important. So again, do keep those coming. I think that's really useful. Yeah, taking plenty of breaks. We talk about your state. We talk about that a lot in NLP. Your state is your frame of mind. We know that if you sit at a computer for long periods of time, you become unproductive. So yeah, take your breaks, get outside, whatever that equates to for you in a practical sense. So do keep those coming, because again, we can share those around. I think that that might be me, folks. Absolutely it is. So there are a few bits we still want to cover with you. We definitely want to do some Q&A, so please do hang around for a bit. We'd love to do that. But from me, just to say thank you. You've been very kind. I've had no abuse as yet. So it's made my very first foray into a virtual world, which scares me, something chronic, much more comfortable. So thank you. Thank you to Andy, because he's been coaching me through this for the last 2 weeks. So we got there in the end, mate. And just to say, do keep an eye out. We've got a lot more coming. Please do feel free to hang around. We've got the Q&A stuff we want to get through. So also to ask you, please, like all small businesses, feedback is crucial. Feedback is king. If you want to connect with us on LinkedIn, either those of you that don't know, We Are Lean and Agile, which is Andy's company, or me, which is BW Training, connect with us on LinkedIn, send us through your feedback, good, bad, indifferent. What did you like? What did you not like? We'd really love to hear from you. Just one final bit from me before I hand over to Andy, which is around the topics, I believe, Andy, some of the subject matter we might be covering. Oh, sorry, apologies.
Yeah, so quick poll here. Just to give Lenny a pat on the back, hopefully. Do you think you can use some of these techniques? I know loads of you have already said you're already using them. So hopefully you do. If I'll leave that poll up there for a second, if you could go in there. We've got 100%. 100%. Yes.
Perfect.
Oh, that's beautiful. Final one, and I'll go back to you, Lenny, if you could maybe just give us a brief précis of these, and I can check out doing the second poll. I've just lost it. Yeah. So what else would you guys like to see? There's you can select more than one, so don't be restricted by that. I think you can if I didn't mess it up, but
there is no failure, only feedback, Mr. Sam.
Exactly. So is there anything else you'd like to see in terms of topics, more controlled dartboard? Sorry, Lenny, it should be you.
I mean, we've skimmed controlled dartboard. Usually if I'm doing this in a training session, I can do a whole day on it. So there's a lot of content in it. So is there more around that you'd like to see? We talked and touched on well-being quite a lot. So, managing your frame of mind, what are some of the techniques around that? So kind of some mindfulness stuff, but with a little bit of a bent towards NLP techniques. I've done an open course recently, and I see some of you are on here, and you will have heard me bang on about this one, the next one, the WTTPPP. It's a phrase called what the thinker thinks, the prover proves. Really useful kind of theory around what am I thinking, and therefore what is my reality based on that thinking. So a lot of these very much linked together. They're all about kind of self-management. I'm a big advocate of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. So I'd love to cover some basic principles with you. If I can give you a fingernail of my excitement around NLP, then you'll go away enthused and excited, and there's loads of stuff around that. So that's another topic. We talked about setting goals. If you are going to be in a position where you are having to stop bumping for a while, then, how are you going to do that? How are you going to set the goals around that? What does that mean for you? So we've got some really nice techniques around that. Also mindful that a lot of you are in the world of work, not all of you, but a lot of you are, and using coaching conversations, particularly when you're working remotely. So actually, how do we encourage ownership? How do we check in on people's well-being? So there's some kind of really basic conversational coaching techniques. And one actually from Andy suggested, and there's a lot of other, there's a whole nother set of stuff if there's something you want to cover, Tuckman's team formation, the forming, storming, norming technique, which some of you may have seen, very relevant at the moment because there's a lot of people in storming, and how do we kind of get ourselves out of that mantra and that thinking. So please do share your ideas. If any of those I haven't explained properly, please do feel free to contact us. Certainly, having done it and the sky hasn't caved in and I haven't passed out in front of an audience of however many there are of you out there, I would be happy to do them again. But obviously it's useful to know what you're interested in. So please do get on the poll and let us know. That would be great. Thank you.
It's not finished yet, Lenny. There's still a chance.
Chance of what?
Are you passing out in front of everyone? Sorry. Nearly destroyed your laptop there.
Yeah. So have we got any kind of Q&A stuff, Andy, that would be useful to pick up on?
So picking up a couple of things. So Pat has raised one about enjoying thinking about temporary things that we're putting in place now, whether they become permanent in the future in a new world.
Yeah, that's an important.
Something common in the chat as well from earlier. Please do add your Q&A, and we'll get them answered. But obviously, and this is really, really tough, how long is this going to go on is something that loads of people are going to say.
Absolutely.
And I don't know whether you've got any tips about how we set some boundaries about that sort of stuff.
One of the things I think we tend to be, the human condition, I think, tends to be trying to resolve the whole thing, trying to understand the whole thing, trying to get to the end goal, which is when is this going to stop? One of the things we work on a lot in coaching is first smallest step. You know, some of this stuff is out of our control. And when this ends, unfortunately, to a lesser or greater extent, is out of our control. How we engage with it, what we do with it, how we use our time and invest that time is in our gift. But try not, one of the things we talk about a lot when we look at goal setting is not to set something that's massive, because it's a bit like eating an elephant with a knife and fork. You know, you need to kind of compartmentalize. What's the smallest step? What's the first thing I can do? There's a brilliant example of what's his name? Spinks. Mark Spinks? Can't remember. Anyway. An Olympic swimmer, you're all going to tell me, you'll get all ping up now. Michael Spinks, thank you very much. Who wanted to qualify for the Olympics, and he was 4 seconds off the qualification time, which I'm no athlete, as you can tell, but 4 seconds apparently in swimming is a huge margin. So what he did is he broke it down and broke it down and broke it down, and he worked out that between now, his starting point, and the end time, which was 4 years' time, if he improved his speed by half the blink of an eye every day, he would get to that 4 seconds. 4 seconds is huge. Half the blink of an eye is not. So again, it's about how am I doing this? What is the language I'm using here with myself, and what is the reality I'm creating? So I kind of avoided the question slightly. No, we don't know when it's going to end. That we don't know that, but we do know where we are now, and we do know that there are things that we can do differently. The question becomes, how do we do that? So this is an interesting one. It's kind of come up in the chat, actually. So Mandy's asked, how do you stop believing everything, people believing everything they hear in the news? There's so much being told to us. Absolutely. There's contradictions. There's, I think we know some basic facts. We know the basic facts of social distancing, or ideally isolation. Andy's going to pick up on that in just a second. We know the basic principles of kind of, you know, wash your hands, keep yourself clean, keep your environment as kind of, you know, as well kept as you can. I think all you can do in this instance is be sensible. I agree. You know, there is an element of scaremongering. You know, papers need to sell papers. Here's more an audience. What do you
Sorry, Lenny. One of the things that I say to a lot of people right now is go to the right information sources. You know, go to NHS/coronavirus, go to gov.uk/coronavirus. They are where you will get the good information. People need to be careful, because there will be people scamming people out there, and there will be people putting fake news. So I think it's really important that people go to those trusted sources, because that's where the NHS and the government is going to push their information out. So it's really important. We do live in a, you know, an internet bound world, and we need to go to the right sources, even more important than ever in times like these.
Okay, mindful a little bit of our time, and I'm noticing people have to jump off and go to various calls, and I know some of you are working, so conscious that that's time out of your diary. Keep them coming in. If you want to email them to us, if you want to kind of keep them coming on this thread, I'm sure we can capture them. We have a commitment, Andy and I have discussed, to maybe look at doing these every couple of weeks. So, you know, jump back on that, bring some new questions up then. You know, this is evolving for all of us. So, you know, please bear with us, and please do come back. We'd love to have people back again. So
the handout is shared in the handout area, so people can download that. We will update it with some of the outputs from the chat and the polls and things like that afterwards. So, but the copy of the slides and stuff like that is there right now. One final piece from me. Obviously, those that know me will know I'm always going to bang on about processes. Obviously, we all need to stay well. Hopefully, fingers crossed. We need to stay safe. We need to stay indoors. We can change our internal processes. We can change the way we do things, and we do have control in that. And the numbers, they are really, really scary, but we can at an individual level really make a difference to that. And I think me and Lenny were chatting briefly beforehand, the question of what about the people that aren't doing this? Well, you don't have control of that. So worry about you, worry about your family, and worry about maintaining social distancing as much as you can. Try and limit visits to the supermarket and things like that, because it's hell on earth. So
times, to be fair, I can't think of anything worse than Lidl's on a Saturday morning under normal circumstances, let alone under these. So yeah. And, it can be very scary to kind of go, yeah, but that's all well and good, but there's other people out there doing what they're doing. How much emotional energy, how much is that impacting your life? What is the cost to you of carrying someone else's burden?
I'd leave it to the boys in blue to sort that out, who, let's be honest, there's so many heroes at the moment. All our public sector workers, our shop workers, our lorry drivers, everyone who's keeping the country actually going. Let's leave it to them, and let's make them as safe as they can be as well.
Okay, I guess that's us. Thank you all very much for your participation. We might consider next time opening some mics up so we can make it a little bit more interactive again, but this has worked really well. So thank you very much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully we'll see you all again in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye. See you later. Look after you.